There needs to be contemporary sources for Jesus for it to be reputable. And honestly,
You do not need contemporary written records in order to prove that something is historical. And in fact, often historians don't even expect that. So here's the thing. First, we do not have every record from the ancient past. We have very few records. And when we look at Palestine as a whole, we have almost nothing besides Josephus. So this should tell you something about that context. The context is that we're looking at an illiterate society, a culture that relied on oral traditions. Now, this is really just the standard practice throughout all of ancient history. We're looking at oral societies that passed on information orally until it was finally written down. Now, when we look at oral tradition, the studies have shown that it is in fact rather accurate, at least in keeping the gist of the story correct. Now, when we're looking at the Gospels, one of the things that we're looking at is oral tradition that has been written down, but we're looking at much more than just that. Now, we know from the author of Luke that he's using other sources. What the author of Luke tells us is that many have come before him in order to try to write this all down, and now he's doing it himself. He tells us that there's other sources. Now, we may not have those sources, but that is rather common when we're looking at ancient histories. So let's look at Josephus here. We know that he's using a variety of sources because we can kind of pick them out, either because he mentions them or because the writing style changes. So let's look at Josephus here. We know that he also uses a variety of different sources that we don't have today. How do we know this? Well, he names some of them, and other places his writing style changes because he's quoting from them. So the fact that we don't have contemporary sources really means nothing here because one, there could have been contemporary sources, and we're pretty sure there were because we have people like Luke who tell us that there were contemporary sources, that there were earlier sources from the beginning. And two, we're looking at oral tradition. That is really what ancient history is based off of. To simply dismiss that is not historical in any manner. So, when people say that we need contemporary sources in order to prove something is historical, they're not relying on the historical method. They're not relying on how historians actually do research. They're making up a new criteria. So, no, we do not need contemporary sources in order to prove that Jesus existed. We can rely on the sources that we do have, which may not be contemporary, but relied on older sources.